Watercolor painting can sometimes feel intimidating, especially for beginners, but the foundation of any good watercolor painting starts with understanding how to use your brushes. That is why today we are focusing on the best and only brush strokes you really need to get started painting today. By the end of this video, you will not only be able to understand essential brush strokes, but we will put all our practice to the test and create a beautiful, loose, spontaneous piece of watercolor art. Once as you know the basics, you really can just mix and match these all together. The possibilities are endless. It's all about enjoying the process of painting just as much as the outcome. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Now, just last week, I launched my Craftamo 12-month watercolor classes in a box subscription, which by the end, you will not only have accumulated 48 half-pan paint colors, but also 24 of my personally designed Craftamo brushes, of which I have included all sorts of different types of brushes in. So I thought it would be a good idea to show you today all of the different types and how they work. Whether you're interested in getting my watercolor classes and supplies in a box or not, hopefully this will be helpful for everyone in general. But if you are interested in my watercolor classes in a box, I actually have an unboxing and painting demonstration video from last week that can give you some more insight and information on these. And I will also leave my product page link in the description of this video so you can check out the details and info plus pictures on the Craftamo website directly. Okay, enough of that. Here, I'm just going to pull out some small A5 pieces of 100% cotton watercolor paper. And actually, this is the exact paper that's going to come in my watercolor classes in a box too. I will also go ahead and pull out the paints and my fun paint tin that also come with the subscription just to demonstrate with as well for today. I'm going to show some terrific basic beginner brush strokes really quickly with these 24 brushes that I showed you. And then we'll put all of that knowledge to the test, and I'll show you how easy it can be to use these basic brush strokes as well as combine things together so that you can actually start painting beautiful loose flower arrangements right now. Now, of the 24 brushes that come with the subscription, 12 of them are actually going to be round brushes. These are the brushes that I tend to use the very most often and literally work for just about any painting that I create. I have all of the sizes ranging from the largest size number 12 brush all the way down to a small number 1 brush. The good news is that as I demonstrate some of the brush strokes that these can do, just keep in mind that any round brush can do this no matter what size. All it does is change the size of the brush stroke. But let's start with the largest, number 12 really quick. This large brush is terrific for broad strokes or large washes because it can hold a lot of water at a time. And being able to cover large areas quickly with watercolor is a key to a lot of techniques. So these larger brushes can be very helpful in that way. The great part about these Craftamo brushes is that because they have such great tips and points to them, even the large brushes can actually paint some pretty thin lines as well. Very versatile. But now moving on to the singular brush strokes that round brushes can do here, let me pull out a smaller brush. In fact, let's just try out the number 1 round. This brush is obviously going to be great at detail work and getting into small spaces. Practicing thin grass lines or brush strokes is great to do with this. These thin lines work very well for stems or leaf vein lines as well. The trick is to keep a light touch and move quickly. Sometimes it can help to even move your whole arm with the stroke. Let me pull out a slightly larger brush and show you some of my favorite brush strokes to do with round brushes though. These are very basic and very simple, and even though I will try this with a number 8 round, any size will work. Making leaf or petal shapes is super easy, and this is a great way to practice brush control and lighter versus heavier touch. If you're starting out the stroke with the tip of the brush, you just pull it out lightly and then press down in the middle and then let up again at the end. And this makes a terrific grass blade. You of course can paint them however long or short you want to. And if you use that same basic stroke starting thin and light and then press down and then just pull the brush off the page, you can create some absolutely lovely petal shapes. In fact, I forgot to do this right now, but I do have a tutorial on this, but you can even go as simple as just pressing the bristles down on the paper, almost like a stamp, and literally creating petals that way too. These are all super simple and easy to master and are terrific basic beginner brush strokes. I'm switching over to the number 6 round now, but you can even use these same strokes and simply combine 2 of them together to make a broader, more thick petal shape as well. In fact, you can also do 2 of these grass blade strokes together and make a nice leaf shape also. The possibilities really are limitless. Just getting the feel and the control of the brush is key here. This is a number 7 brush, and you can see that I can even add 3 of those strokes together and make even more thick, full, and plump petals. All you have to do when you're done with these petals is paint in a thin stem line, maybe a center stamen area, and you've got a complete flower. You could even add in a little grass brush stroke or a leaf stroke to finish this off. If you want to get really fancy, you can even take a touch of darker, more concentrated paint of the same color or a different color and add a little bit of that to the center area of the petals while it's still wet to create a gradient of color. And like I say, these all have terrific points to them. Even the larger sizes can create some pretty thin lines with just a gentle touch of the hand. Something that can be really fun to try and is great brush control practice for these strokes is to load the brush and just do a continual line of thin to thick, gently pulling out and then pushing down, then letting up and going again. And like I say, this can work with all round brush sizes. I'll pull out a couple more of these round brush sizes in just a minute, but I think you get the basic idea here. These are all super simple, basic brush strokes, and you can practice these and also actually create something right now even. When we get to the painting part of this tutorial, I will be using some of these brush strokes that you just saw, so make sure you stick around. All right, let me set that aside for a minute and pull out another piece of paper and let's see what some Filbert brushes can do. I have 4 Filbert brush sizes that will be included in my watercolor classes in a box, and I have decided to, rather than just number them, be more accurate in the size description, so I have labeled each of these by the inch measurement. I've just measured this according to that thick width of the brushes. For the smallest, I have a 1/4 inch, then I have a 3/8, a 1/2 inch, and lastly a 5/8 for the largest. And just like with the round brushes, all of the brush strokes that I will be demonstrating can be done with any size of Filbert. All it does is change how large or small the stroke will be. Because of the nice round shape at the end of this brush, when I create brush strokes using the Filbert, I start with that rounded end and then I can pull the brush out to create this stroke. Then depending on how you turn or pull the brush can create different brush stroke shapes. If I just hold the brush steady and pull the stroke out to one side or another, I naturally get a lovely tapered curve with a larger rounded end on one side and a skinnier pointed end on the other. These can be bigger or smaller, thicker or thinner, just depending on how you pull the stroke out. So I recommend just playing around with this a bit and getting a feel for what it can do. Then to add a little twist to the stroke, rather than holding the brush in a stationary position, you can also gently rotate the brush in your hand as you pull out the stroke to create the tapered look. You'll notice that when I do it this way, I can make the stroke a little more straight rather than curved. Again, I just recommend playing with this and practicing to get the feel. And of course, you can add variation to any of these by adding another stroke right next to it to create a wider, more double-looking petal as well. Definitely lots of possibilities here. Let me just pull out the next size down and demonstrate how you can sort of put these strokes together to form a pretty and easy loose flower shape. I'm not going to take a ton of time with this, but some options to consider here is to add maybe double layers of petals, maybe just half the flower so that it's more of a side-facing view, and of course you can add stems, leaves, or a stamen to the flower to finish it off as well. I'll just pull out an even smaller size and also demonstrate how you can paint flowers that have more of a swirled center, such as a rose or maybe even a peony. You just start with the smaller, more swirl look strokes in the center of the flower, and then you continue to work your way outward, making them more broad and full as you go. Now, if you don't catch on to this quite yet, don't worry. I am going to be demonstrating this again as we get into the painting at the end. Something that can even be fun to do with flowers like this is come back to the center area with a little bit more paint to make it look more dimensional too. All right, I'll just play around with a couple more of these flowers with a smaller 1/4 inch brush, but these really are super fun, loose flowers to paint and can really add a lot to a quick free-handed painting. I hope you are enjoying the tutorial so far and maybe finding some of this information helpful. If you like my painting and teaching style today, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. Now, just for fun, I might just pull out a number 5 round and add some center stamen dots for some of these flowers. Like I say, I'm just playing and practicing a little bit. I'm not worrying about things turning out perfectly or creating a masterpiece. This is just fun brushstroke practice. Okay, let's move on to the next type of brush that I have in my watercolor classes, and that is the angle brush. I really have a lot of fun with angle brushes. They are terrific at one-stroke type flowers, grass, and leaves. I have 3 sizes included with this: a 1/4 inch, a 3/8 inch, and a 1/2 inch. And I do have a little typo on the 1/4 inch brush. This accidentally got labeled as a cat's tongue, but don't worry, this is going to be fixed when my classes in a box come out. Now, for some of the easiest little flower petals ever, all you have to do is hold the brush sort of like it looks like it's upside down. Then you lay the brush down on the paper with the longer point at the center of where the flower will be and simply pull the brush out. And this makes the loveliest little soft diamond type of shape. Throw a few petals of these into a circle and you literally have a flower in seconds. I actually painted some beautiful hydrangea flowers using this brush stroke a while back, so if you haven't yet, you'll definitely have to check that tutorial out sometime. And of course, you can also use the broad side of these brushes to cover larger areas on the painting, as well as turn the brush to more of the thin side and paint thin lines or brush strokes as well. With this next brush stroke, I will actually hold the brush in the same way. I'll pull up a little bit on the bristles and then pivot that short end of the brush around, gently maneuvering the bristles up and down as I pivot to create some roughly loose looking petals. In fact, you can use the same brushstroke idea, but instead of making it flowy and curved, you can also be a little bit more abrupt and aggressive and paint some petals with more jagged edges as well. You of course can paint these around into a full circle for an open flower, or you can literally only paint 3 or 4 of these into more of a half flower shape. Then you can just add in a thin stem line and call the flower done. To do this, you can either use the thin side of the angle brush, or you can pull out a round brush like this number 3 to finish this off. Something else angle brushes are terrific at is painting in grass blades and leaves. Just hold that brush in the same way as before. Start with the thin side of the brush at the bottom, and then as you pull the stroke out, slightly turn the brush to more of the broad side of the bristles to make the stroke thicker, and then turn it back again to the thin side to finish the stroke off with a nice point. So super easy to do, and they look good too. If you do 2 smaller strokes similar to this and combine them into one, you can easily make some more broad leaf shapes as well. So many possibilities here. One of my favorite things to paint with an angle brush, and I have several more in-depth tutorials on this technique as well if you'd like to check them out, is paint in flower buds like roses or tulips or something. Just paint in one half of the stroke similar to the broad leaves that we just painted, and it's best to let this dry a little bit before we paint in the other half. So while I wait for that to dry, I'm going to paint some nice delicate thin grass blades using the 1/4" angle brush. Aren't those so much fun? Okay, I don't think my buds are completely dry yet, but I will just go ahead and show the rest anyway so you can get an idea of it really quick. But I'll just come back in here and paint in the other half literally in the same way as before, making sure that the colors touch on the line in the middle so that there's no white paper gaps as you go. And this is a perfect bud looking shape. This is still wet, so I shouldn't do this just yet, but you can also easily doll these buds up with a touch of greenery, either just a stem or even some greenery surrounding the outside of the bud. Now, like I say, my paint is a little bit wet here, so my colors are going to bleed. Usually I let this dry first, but hopefully you get the idea. These are seriously so much fun to do and look so pretty when you paint them in more of a proper way than the rush job that I'm doing. Some of the angle brush strokes can take a little bit of practice to get the hang of also, but let me tell you, once as you do, you can seriously whip out some beautiful and simple flowers in literally just minutes. The practice is definitely worth it in the long run. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the last set of brushes. I've got a fun assortment in this next little grouping. First, I'll pull out maybe some rigger brushes. I have 2 here that come with the subscription classes. They are both smaller in size because I love using these for nice thin lines. These bristles are thin and long and can hold a good amount of paint and water, allowing for some nice long thin lines. I have a number 1 and a number 2 rigger here. This number 1 is really nice and thin, and it works so great for grass lines, thin stems, and vein lines on both leaves and flowers. With this brush, it is actually hard to accidentally have lines be too thick because it is just not a tapered bristle. It's pretty much the same thickness all the way down. So even when I press down to its full capacity, the lines are still going to be pretty thin. The number 2 rigger is really kind of the same, just slightly larger. So when I press down with this one, the line can get a little bit thicker than the number 1, but at the same time, if you use a lighter touch and a quick movement, you can also paint some nice thin lines as well. All right, let me pull out another fun brush to play around with a little bit. This one is a dagger brush. This has such a fun shape to it. One of the bristle sides is long and flat and comes to a nice point at the tip, and the other side is curved and rounded. I love using this brush for leaves and grasses especially. This really creates some beautiful shapes. I like to hold it just like we did with the angle brush, almost upside down looking. In fact, you can even use the same strokes as the angle brush too, but you'll see that these are going to be a little more soft, curved, and fluid looking, and the angle brush is more crisp and straight. You can, of course, create long or short strokes as well as combine 2 or more strokes together. And because this has such a nice point to the tip, you can also paint some thin lines with the tip of the brush as well. Also similar to the angle brushes, you can paint in some petal shapes with this. Again, I feel like these are just a little bit more loose and organic looking compared to the angle brush. With the angle brush, they just tend to be more the same and more straight in the appearance. Now lastly, the final 2 brushes I'll pull out are what's called cat tongue brushes, obviously named because of the shape of the bristles. They have a wide base at the bottom and then come to a nice point at the tip. These brushes work really well at getting into tight and tiny spaces and creating thin lines as well as thick when you press down more on the brush. When creating petal shapes with this brush, they also can be a little bit more loose and organic compared to maybe a round brush using that same stroke. The ends aren't totally rounded off either, which is also kind of a fun effect. But I think my very favorite thing to do with these cat's tongue brushes is paint loose, organic looking leaves. You can start the stroke out with the thin end of the brush, then you rotate the brush as you pull the stroke out so you can create a more thick middle. Then you continue to rotate the brush back to the thin side to finish it off. And look at this awesome, rough, natural looking leaf this creates. It is seriously my favorite. I'm literally just rotating the brush into a half circle as I pull out on the stroke, and this is what I end up with. Just love this, and it is so much fun to do. These are just very free and organic looking, I think. Really, the bottom line to any of these things is that there is so many possibilities, even more than what I've showed you today, actually. But these are some of the best ones to get your feet wet and get you started. They're fairly easy to pick up on, they look good, and the possibilities are endless. You can mix and match these things together to create lovely, free-handed loose watercolor compositions that only take minutes to do. And they also look good when you're done. You are only limited here by your imagination. But with that being said, why don't we put this to the test? Let me just clean this off really quickly, pull out a clean sheet of paper and some clean water, and let's see what we can come up with. You, of course, can pull out any brushes or paints that you have on hand, and keep in mind that with the subscription watercolor classes in a box, all of the brushes that I showed you today could be yours. I think I am just going to quickly tape my paper down a little bit with some artist tape to help with some warping, and I also actually do this just so that I don't move my paper too much in the camera's view. Then I think I'll just grab a random handful of these brushes and we'll see what we can come up with here. I've got a couple of Filberts in here, the 3/8 and the 1/2 inch. And let's see, I have a good assortment of sizes from the round brushes. I've got a number 6, a number 2, a number 9, and a number 4. I also have a cat's tongue. This one is the 4th inch. Yay, maybe I can paint some of those super cool leaves. And I've got a couple of angle brushes, the 4th inch and the 3/8 inch. And then lastly, I have a dagger brush and the number 1 rigger. This is going to be a fun experiment. I actually challenge you to give this a try if you can, whether it's something similar to what I'm going to do, or you can feel free to try a composition that is totally different altogether. We are just going to play around here and have some fun. This is supposed to be a stress-free piece. We are just applying some of those basic brushstroke techniques that we just learned and see what we can come up with. Now, you can, of course, use whatever colors you'd like or have on hand. I think I'd like to mix up a pretty light pink color by using a color called Rose Madder, mixed with maybe just a touch of vermilion. And I am adding a bit of extra water in here as well to keep it nice and light in value. If you ever feel like you need to check your colors before you begin painting, just pull out a scrap piece of paper and test them out really quick. Now, using the 1/2 inch Filbert brush, I'll just start by making a few strokes for the center part of the flower. I'll just keep these small at first and swirl them around each other back and forth into a circle shape. Now, I know this might not look like much right now, but don't quit yet. It is going to get better. Now that we have sort of the center area filled in, we can start building on that with some larger, prettier, more purposeful strokes of the brush. I'll just start on one side and work my way to the bottom of the flower. Then I'll do the same on the other side. Okay, this is starting to take some shape now. Let's create a little bit more dimension in here by pulling out a smaller Filbert. This is the 3/8 inch, and then I'll pull out some more concentrated paint of the Rose Madder. Then I'll just start applying some of the color into the center area of the flower again, sort of following the same strokes that are already there. Now, my initial paint is still a little bit wet, so the color is going to bleed and blend a little bit, which is great. But if your initial paint layer has dried out, you know what, that's okay too. You can still add in some darker brush strokes into the center area anyway. In fact, I am probably going to let this fully dry and then come back in just a minute and add some wet on dry strokes too. Okay, that looks pretty good. It definitely added a bit of dimension in here. And I actually think I want to add an even darker color right into the very center. This is just going to emphasize this look even more. Maybe this time I'll try a bit of alizarin crimson. Awesome. That turned out pretty good, I think. I like that. It is just loose and yet a very pretty little flower. And I actually think I might add one more flower just like this a little farther down from this one now. This is just going to create a nice center focal point feature that I can build the rest of the composition around. I think I'll just use the exact same colors even, but of course you're welcome to change it up if you'd rather. I'm kind of wishing that I had painted these a little bit closer together. We're just going to go with the flow, I guess, but maybe I can add in a couple more petals to sort of fill in this gap. Okay, I like that better. This is a great little start to this piece. Let's try painting a different type of flower now to change things up a little bit. Maybe I'll pull out that larger number 9 round brush and try some petal strokes with that next. I might also change up my color a little bit by adding a touch of mauve into the rose madder. Now I'll just use those brush strokes that we practiced earlier to create some nice petal shapes. I'll use 2 strokes on each petal to make them a little bit thicker, and I'm not worrying too much about having the ends perfectly rounded off. If they are, then great, but if they're not, that's okay too. We're just playing around and trying some things out here. When you get over to the first flower, if you find that they're going to overlap, just be a little bit more careful and strategic when you paint the petals in here. While my flower is still a little bit wet, I might even try adding in a touch of darker, more concentrated mauve right into the center of the flower petals here and there and blend that in to create some dimension to this flower. This, of course, is optional though. All right, moving on. Why not try out a different type of flower here now? I'll use the number 6 round brush and change up my paint color again. This time I want it to be more of a bluish violet color. So maybe I'll try mixing some mauve with a tiny bit of phthalo blue. These flowers are going to be super simple. We are just basically creating a stamp of the bristles themselves. All I'm doing here is loading the brush with color, then simply pressing it down on the paper. And you can pull it out a little bit if you need to, but these really can just be small and short. I'll probably do a couple of these stamp shades to create each little flower. And at this point, I'm just visualizing in my mind where the stem of the flower will be and which direction to take it. But if you have a hard time with that, feel free to paint in a green stem first and build off of that. Or you can even just use a pencil and draw a light pencil line for where the stem would be, just whatever works for you. I'm going to go ahead and paint another one of these pointing in a slightly different direction this time. Another little side note, you might notice that as I move upward on this flower stalk, I am gradually painting the flowers smaller as I go. All right, great job. I think I'm ready to change up my colors again. I think maybe a nice yellow would look good in here. So maybe I'll pull out a bit of this cadmium yellow and maybe just add a slight hint of alizarin crimson in the mix to help tie these colors into what we already have on the page. And you know what? I was going to paint these flowers in using the round brush, but I'm actually changing my mind. I might go ahead and pull out that smaller 1/4 inch Filbert brush and use that instead. I'm just going to paint some very small, almost daisy-like flowers in here using this Filbert. Nothing too complicated, just moving these brush strokes around in a nice circle shape. Here's a couple of tips for you as you create a free-handed composition. Try to keep everything nice and close together. Have your items touching or maybe even overlapping sometimes. And another thing that helps is to make sure you have big, medium, and small shapes in here. I had an art professor that would always say, same is boring, boring, boring. Changing up things like the colors, the shapes, and the sizes can really create more interest in your paintings. And as another side note, next week I am actually going to be going over the paints that come in these classes a little bit more in detail. I'm going to do some quick color swatches and then of course do a painting demo as well. So make sure you tune in for that next week. I think you're going to love it. I really like what these 3 little yellow flowers added. So to balance this out just a bit, I think I'll try one on this other side as well. In fact, I'll give you a little bit of a glimpse into the future. Right now, I only paint one of these, but I do eventually decide to come back in and add another one. So if you want to, go ahead and do that right now while you're at it. Okay, that looks pretty good as far as color and flowers go. Let's try adding in a touch of greenery next and see what that does. Then if we need to, we can always come back in here and add more flowers later. I'll just mix up a nice green color. Maybe I'll try some olive green with a little bit of Van Dyke brown just to darken the color up a little bit. Whoa, that was way too much brown. Maybe I'll take some sap green to try to bring that green color back a little bit. I think I'll also just put some pure olive green off to the side here as well, just in case I want to change my colors up as I get going. Now, I think I will paint in some center stem lines for these leaf branches this time. I'll just use the rigger brush and paint that in first, but actually while I'm at it, maybe I'm going to go ahead and add in the stem lines for these purple stalks of flowers too. Okay, good. Now using the 3/8" angle brush, I'll paint in some nice leaf strokes along the center line, moving back and forth from each side and trying to make the leaves look a little bit different from each other as I go, whether that is a slight change in color, direction, or size of the leaf. I might just go ahead and add a few more of these leaves in here and there too, just to fill in some of the empty space. Now, I think I'll paint in a few more stem lines for a few more branches of leaves. I'm also going to change up my green color a little bit by adding in a touch of ivory black this time. Let's make these leaves a little bit smaller in size by using the 1/4" angle brush this time. And you know what? Let's have some fun and change up the leaf shapes now by using the number 4 round brush instead. These are going to be more rounded off compared to the angle brush leaves. I think we can just use that brush stamp sort of look for this. In fact, while I'm at it, I may even take a touch of this green color and add in some little leaf shapes or splashes of color in some of the empty spaces here in the center of the page that go around these flowers in the middle to sort of fill things out and tie everything together better. Now using the number 2 round, I'll pull out a little bit of dioxazine purple and just a touch of cobalt blue into the mix, and I feel like I just want some very small, dark buds of flowers in here and there. I don't know if that was a good choice or not. What do you think? At this point, this is the part where I decided that I needed another small yellow flower to balance out my composition a little bit better. So if you added that in, go ahead and skip this part. And if you haven't, feel free to add one in if you feel like your painting needs it. All right, I'll just add a touch of hooker's green into my green mixture with maybe a touch more ivory black, and then using the dagger brush, I'll paint in a few leaf strokes down at the bottom of the page. In fact, if you want to change up the green colors down here as you go to add some variety, please, by all means, feel free to do so. Those are a pretty good start. I do think we need a little bit more. I think I want to add some darker green colors in here. So I'm going to add even more of that ivory black into the mix. And then this time I'm going to pull out my cat's dung brush for a few of these. Like I say, these are my favorite. They are so fun to do and just add a special, more wild and free look to the piece. The good thing about the cat's tongue is that I can add in not only the leaves with the half turn, but I can also just use the thin side of the brush or the nice point of the brush to paint in some thin grass-like leaves also. At this point, I'm just trying to fill in the space at the bottom to finish this off. All right, great job. Now at this point, I'm just going to add in a few little details and finishing touches to the piece and we can call it done. I sort of feel like I need some darker color in the center of those larger pink flowers still. So at this point, this is all dry and I can just paint in some brush strokes in here, wet on dry. I'll use the smallest Filbert brush for this, take some alizarin crimson and add in a few more strokes to the center area here just to make it pop a little bit more. Now I'll take a round brush, some Van Dyke brown or sepia or both, and mix that with some ivory black for a nice dark brown color, and then we'll use that dark brown to paint in some dots of color into the centers of the open flowers. And that, my friends, is it for this fun and carefree brushstroke practice painting. The fun thing here is that there really are so many possibilities. Just keep practicing those basic brushstrokes that I showed you at the beginning, and you can mix, match, and combine all sorts of different flowers, leaves, and petal types into a beautiful painting. I tell you, this is really limitless, so I hope you'll give your hand a try at a few of these. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you click the link in the description of this video and check out my Craftamo product page for the awesome watercolor classes and supplies in a box. These are only going to be available for a couple of weeks, very limited time. I hope you had some fun today and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.